Okay,
Good evening, hi, namaskar, namaste, good morning, good afternoon, whichever part of the world you are in and whichever time of the day you are in. A pleasure to be part of this panel. The discussion, I'm sure, will be very interesting for you because what we are currently going through, the COVID-19 pandemic, somewhere has removed all the borders. It has connected us intentionally, by choice for some of us, but by force for most of us. In our small world and at the world at large, making sure that all of us are speaking a language for once, which everyone understands. Borders have disappeared, languages have become similar, words absolutely similar. And I'm sure the curiosity with which you're sitting here today is like, how do I bring climate change into a coaching conversation? How can I make it a part of my agenda with the client and still be ethical and make it also financially viable? But then, how does it start and where does it start? As coaches, we know our self-awareness is highly important. We need to be authentic and vulnerable. Therefore, the start is from within. This pandemic, surprisingly, has had beautiful words coming up: resilience, inward journey, understanding the self, wonderful deeper relationships. But one word which no conversation has missed is nature, climate. Surprises thrown by nature have also made us aware we are part of her, and therefore we cannot afford to take her for granted or ignore her. So how do you bring all of this into your coaching conversations, especially with clients for whom the awareness is pretty low, and for many others who don't want to go into that space? All of this and more is what we intend to cover. And like always, the Coacharya colloquiums that I've been part of, you have been an integral part. Your questions and the emotions that you send across in the chat box will continue in this one as well. But the request is, for the first few minutes, keep your questions aside and you can start sharing your emotions instead. And before we move there, what I would love to do is a presencing. Just making sure that everyone is here present in this moment, because when we are talking something as deep as climate change, it is extremely important to be in the here and the now. So a request to all of you, kindly close your eyes. The moment you close your eyes, you become aware of your breathing. If it isn't very deep, it doesn't matter. Sit comfortably in whatever you're seated on, the chair, the ground, on a bed, with a backrest. Make sure you're feeling the tailbone. Make sure your back is completely comfortable. Get your hands together and be grateful, because the sounds that you're going to hear during this process are going to be a few inner questions that will come, emotions that will come, but also sounds of nature. The quiet of nature will be talking to us. Don't get disturbed by it, accept it. Extremely important for you now to be in that journey of gratitude. Gratitude to Mother Nature for giving you this time where you can look inward and understand what exactly is important to you. Gratitude to understand the value of self-love. Gratitude to understand how important it is to be connected, for many of us, reconnected to those people to whom we didn't have time for. Gratitude for making us understand how important nature is. As your breath is now getting calmer, realize the one you've placed your feet on or you're seated upon is the one who's holding you in that secure space. Gratitude that you are fine and you are here today on time for this beautiful discussion. Gratitude that those close to you are fine and with you. Gratitude that your neighborhood is completely fine, the world around you is fine. Because for once, when the world around us is fine, we are fine. As you become calmer with this understanding, silently give power to that one chant, Loka Samastas Sukhino Bhavantu. Because whatever is out there in the world gets reflected in your actions and vice versa. When you feel completely ready, you can open your eyes and come in. Thank you very much. And before we move on, just one very important request. Drop your questions, stay in this mode and watch the film. And as you watch the film, please send us in the chat box what emotions are running through your head. Alison, can you take over?
Thank you, Rashmi. Yes, I'm just going to share a short animation from the RSA here in the UK on climate change. I've just realised I need to rewind it, so I will share it. Just bear with me, I'll go back to the beginning. Thank you.
Every aspect of our lives will be touched by climate change. Climate is not something that's happening elsewhere. It's not happening to other people, even if it may be hitting other populations more intensely than it's hitting the one that you're in. It will touch every life and transform every aspect of that life, down to the decisions we make with our children and family, where we live, what kinds of jobs are available, how much economic growth we can come to expect. It's a totalizing, all-encompassing system, and everything we do over the next century will be conducted in the theater of climate change. We had been taught to expect that climate change was very, very slow, that it was something that would be unfolding on a timescale of decades. And so we could imagine, while it might be a problem for our grandchildren and their grandchildren, that we had a lot of time to address the issue. We had a lot of time to grow our way out of the issue and invent technological solutions to the problem. In fact, more than half of all of the fossil fuel emissions that we've put into the atmosphere in all of human history have been produced in the last 25 years, which means that we've now done more damage to the climate since Al Gore wrote his first book on global warming, since the UN established the IPCC, and in all the millennia before. This is not an old phenomenon. We're not dealing with the legacy of the Industrial Revolution. We're dealing with the damage that we're doing every day in real time. And we're seeing that damage on our TV screens finally in the last few years with coverage of extreme weather, natural disasters. But people haven't really begun and how little time we have to deal with the problem. They say that if we end up where we'll be at the end of the century without changing course, our grain yields could be half as bountiful as they are today, which means we could have 50% more people on the planet and half as much grain to give them. On economics, if we again stay on the course that we're on by the end of the century, we'll have seen $600 trillion in damages from climate change, which is more than double all the wealth that exists in the world today. There's horrifying research on the relationship between climate and conflict, so that every half degree of warming, you see between 10 and 20% increase in conflict. We're now at about 1 or 1.1 degrees of Celsius warming above the pre-industrial average. The UN projects that on the course we're on now, by the end of the century, at a little north of 4 degrees of warming. And at that point, there'll be parts of the world that could be hit with 6 climate-driven natural disasters at once. The UN believes we could be dealing with as many as 1 billion climate refugees. We've already left the world that we all grew up on. The planet is now hotter than at any point in all of human history. we are responsible for this climate that we are walking into, and just how bad it gets will always be up to us. Every tick upward of temperature makes all of these impacts, from agricultural yields to conflict to public health issues to sea level rise, makes each of those worse. And how far along the path to say 4.3 degrees we get will be determined by what we do. The future of humanity is literally in our hands. And by that, I mean not just the people who will live on the planet over the next century, but literally the people who are taking action now, today. We are writing the climate future of the next decade now, and we are facing the possibility, although it's vanishingly thin, of human extinction at our own hands. And if we avoid that, which I hope and trust that we will, it will be entirely because we have made affirmative choices to avoid it. That story, in addition to being horrifying, distressing, and dispiriting, is also, I think, again, empowering, in that it reminds us that we are completely in control of our own fate. And so, as horrible as it sounds to contemplate these futures, they are only at the moment hypothetical, and whether we get them and make them real will be our doing. If we get there, we will have been responsible for that suffering, and if we avoid them, we will be responsible for that alternative outcome.
So please do share how that lands with you emotionally in the chat box. We've got I am because we are, anxiety and concern and sorrow, a sense of urgency, shivering. This callous, a sense of us as humans is callous and anger. Peter, did you want to say anything in response to that video? I'm unmuting you. Can you unmute yourself? You're muted. Ah, there we go.
No, there we go.
There we go.
I was just watching the great range of feelings that it invokes, and we'll return to this when we start to look at how do we emotionally do the work of not becoming, as somebody put in here, overwhelmed. How do we stay wide-eyed, curious, and able to deal with the waves of emotion when we face something as large scale as what was shared in those 5 minutes? Something that affects not only every human being on this planet, but every part of this planet and every sentient being that we share this time and this one earth with. There is a lovely teaching by a First Nations American teacher who I shared a platform with. He was in his late 70s. And who works very closely with nature. And he said, a true leader is somebody who can make a decision with awareness of the 7 generations that come before you, the 7 generations that will come after you, and all sentient beings that you share this moment in time with. And I thought, now, what an amazing definition of leadership. And most of us are only at the very beginnings of stepping up to that ability, to stay open to what is happening and to see it as a teacher and not become reactive. And what beautiful words. Impatience, compassion, irritation, anger, overwhelm, depression, guilt. These are ones that we experience whenever we share this video or other talks that we give. These are natural human reactions. How do we support ourselves, but also those we lead, those we coach, those we work with, to stay awake with this?
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen once again and move on from there. Thank you, Peter. Sorry, I seem to have done something unhelpful.
So Lit Mobile just sent me this solar wireless battery pack. I'm excited. Let's see what's inside.
I'm going to stop sharing because that's not really intended to happen. This is Peter warned me that this would happen, and I said, no, it won't. We've got it completely sorted out. And then I clicked the wrong thing. I do apologise. I will be back with you in 1 second. Lovely. Okay. Right.
And so while Alison's doing that, one of the great learnings of COVID is that we've all had to increase our virtual working skills. And one of those skills is to be able to have something technologically go wrong and stay open, centered and unflustered. And so Alison's doing a beautiful modeling of that. Thank you, Alison. Peter,
that is marvelously generous. And I'm, you know, we've done the thing that went wrong now, so all will be fine. I'm smiling and I'm recognizing them. I'm smiling when there are a lot of very deep and difficult emotions as a result of that video that we've seen, and a result of looking into what is happening around us at the moment. And it is truly a very difficult thing to look at and to hold. And so I'll just share a couple of thoughts as to what sort of led to the formation of this group, the Climate Coaching Alliance. And there's something around, you know, when speaking to people, there isn't anyone that doesn't care about the world or nature in some way. And they just feel very unsure of what to do about it. You know, do we protest? Do we lie down on runways? Do we write to politicians? Do we become overwhelmed? And there are many people who have given so much and just have become very worn out and spent. And it's very understandable, because when you look at the size that, you know, if you think about circle of concern and circle of influence, the circle of concern is huge. You know, it's the size of a planet. And the circle of influence, when we consider ourselves just as an individual being in our sort of radically individualized model that the Western world has been sort of progressing, then our circle of influence is really, really tiny. And so that sense of overwhelm is, you know, inevitable in a sense. But as I sort of developed my own eco-awareness, I started to understand that the problem that we face is not one of science, it's not one of data, it's not one of, you know, we understand the metrics of the problem at a data level, but we don't understand them at a psychological level. And so when I started to understand that the journey that we need to go on is one of transformation, is one of growth, and is a psychological shift, is one of story, that really sort of offered a real aha moment. And in some ways, it started to make me come back to the idea that actually coaches not only have something to offer here in shifting that sort of human-earth relationship, in enabling a different story to emerge, but actually they perhaps have a critical role to play, because facing into a place of the unknown, where we have an outcome that's huge, you know, this idea of a living earth, where the pathway forward is unknown, but what's required to get there is compassion, is non-judgment, is not criticizing others, but actually understanding our deep interconnectedness and supporting others to become curious and to experiment and to learn to love and to learn to see that they are nature and nature is them. That journey of transformation is one that coaches are skilled to support people to take. And when I say coaches, I mean coaches, psychologists, facilitators, people in this space. We have something really valuable to offer here. And another point that Rashmi may have made, I think Rashmi may have shared this quote, or it may be somebody else, from Maya Angelou, the American author and singer, that whatever the question, community is the answer. And so rather than seeing ourselves as individual, tiny individuals who have very little capacity to shift that big picture, we thought, Rather, let's build a community of coaches who have the skill to hold these conversations about ecology, about connecting people into their ecological and climate, into the sort of ecological and climate crisis, and connecting them into that, raising people's awareness about their own capacity to deal with that, but also raising their awareness and helping them take responsibility and ownership for the actions and choices they might make. And if we think that we sit down with leaders of businesses and leaders of very significant businesses every day, if we were skilled at having these conversations, then we may be able to effect some transformation in how people see themselves and their place and their role in the world. But we don't know how to do it. So creating the Climate Coaching Alliance was one way to build a community that enables to really accelerate our learning in this space, to learn from each other and to really learn at speed. Because actually, we have such a big transition to make that we can't learn at the speed of the fastest learner. We have to really learn much faster than that and to leapfrog over the learning that we already have. So community, coaches coming together around this and sort of really seeing this as something that's within our gift to deliver into this space is one of the ways that we see that we can really affect some of the system that we're sitting within. And already the Coaching Climate Alliance, it's been alive, if you like, for 6 months. We have just about to emerge a global statement from the coaching professional bodies that is articulating the importance of a more ecologically aware stance as coaches and to take responsibility for ourselves and our work in this much wider systemic capacity. And our community is already global. We ran an event on the 5th of March, which is a 24-hour conversation around the globe from New Zealand to Hawaii. And Ram was very kindly hosted one of the sessions for us here in India. One of the hours he hosted. And from that global conversation, there was lots of understanding of not only the work that needed to be done, but people really on those calls really got a sense of mission, both from themselves, but also from their coaching community, that this is the work that we can do. So people suddenly felt that there was a way for them as coaches, or an emerging pathway for them as coaches, to really bring their heart work around the climate and the earth and what they could see happening, and their business work of coaching together, and bringing those two skills together in a way that enabled them to align, to offer something really valuable to help shift some of the conversations and dialogue and perspectives around this climate crisis, and with our clients and with each other. So we very quickly have established a global community, and that is continuing to grow. And we just really welcome you to join that and to become part of it, and to really use that space to test and learn. Rashmi, I wonder if there's something you wanted to say before we move on to your next slide.
Honestly, Alison, on March 5th, before that, the meetings that were there also with coaches worldwide, it was Wuhan that was affected, and not much conversation about the COVID pandemic that was happening. And during the March 5th also, people were not that much affected by this, thinking that this is going to become a pandemic that is going to affect all of us. So for me, it was the biggest takeaway when I was part of it was, what can I start at an individual level? Because as a parent, I felt very guilty for the world that I'm going to have not inherited, but I borrowed it from my child. So when he's ready to take over, and I realized that thought that a lot of parents in the conversation felt, that what are we giving back to our children? We borrowed it from them, and when they're going to take over, what have we done? So it was a completely guilty feeling. But then like we were speaking before, hope was what came in when we heard the common questions and the common answers that came, that if we start even now, it's not too late. So that's what I carried away. And I noticed that hope remained in most of the conversations across the globe that happened. And that is where the next slide that you put together comes in. While everything came to a standstill, as far as human life and work was concerned, human careers were concerned, there was a complete lockdown. What the planet showed us was things we had never seen. In fact, the government of India had set aside a huge amount to clean the Ganga. And just a few weeks of lockdown, the Ganga cleansed herself quite a bit. And that's the picture that you can see. I'm sure everyone has seen all of these pictures telling us that the planet has decided to take complete charge, and we only need to be bystanders. Jaya, you are from the north, and that side of Delhi where the air index quality was so bad, suddenly people are breathing, and they're breathing good, pure air. So what do you have to share? How has your experience been as part of the lockdown?
Yeah, thank you, Rashmi. Well, this lockdown has actually opened up a lot of stuff in the mind and hearts. And I think for the first time, it feels like I have shifted to a new place and the earth is washed completely. Doesn't feel like it's the same place because in the last so many years, we have been not able to see the buildings across our buildings. Everything was hazy, and more than visibility, the problem of, where is my child breathing was very, very troubling. And somehow this wake up call on coronavirus has made us realize in how much less we can actually survive, and in how much less we need still coexist with the ecology and really have a balance. I mean, it's really, really creating a lot of wake up calls and awareness for all of us. So that's what I'm noticing. I mean, May time, we are having hailstorms, clean air, no need for so much of traffic on the road. Our car can be parked and we can still carry on with the life. So
work from home, I think, was something that many people thought was not possible.
Yeah, exactly. A new way of living, a new way of doing things, and still nothing is stopping. Everything is going on. So it's actually a lot of message to humans about the arrogance we carry, about the lifestyles we carry. So yeah, that's about it.
Okay, and for those of you who are listening and watching, I'm sure you too have seen a lot of changes happening around you. So please do share it on the chat box, because all these pictures are definitely memory of how nature cleansed herself, if and when she decided to take over. Because I feel it's so much of arrogance when we say, if we give her an opportunity, but it's when she decides to take over. Honestly, for me, the metaphor is that of a mother who has decided to put us on a punishment mode, saying, stand in the corner. This is your time to take time to understand that now you will sit there and think how you will coexist with whoever else I've created. So this intermingling of ecosystems is what makes it absolutely beautiful for me. So that is where I think when we talk about all of this, Peter is the right person to come in now for whatever he has brought about, which is an amazing framework that we will be talking about. So Peter, it's up to you.
Just as you do that, Peter, there was a question that you might build into this from Shiva Subramanian, which was, nature operates on certain operating principles. Can we look at that too? So just a little curveball to throw into your next slide.
Thank you, Alison. And just to mention as a little note, Alison, next time you're on live mic, your shuffling papers is causing interference on your sound. So I was asked to mention it. And thank you, Shiva. And I love the other thing you also shared, which I think builds on what Rashmi and Jaya have both beautifully shared, which is I think we have to step back, but not just be bystanders, not just the children, but students. What can nature teach us? How do we run our organizations the way nature operates, not the way we want to be exploitive of nature? And how do we build that sense of cyclical involvement? So instead of talking about the nature, I often talk about the more than human world, because in our language, we often locate the environment as something out there. And it was beautiful earlier when Rashmi, when you said, what is out there is also in here, and what is in here is also out there. So on that May the 5th, we use this framework, which with the help of others I developed, which is about the cycle we all need to go through, either as leaders or as coaches or as parents, which starts with being eco-curious. How do we stand not in denial, but wanting to find out at our learning edge, finding out what's going on in humanity, finding out what's going on in nature. And it's only when we come with that real level of inquiry that we become open to discovery. And that's where we can move on to being eco-informed, as the young and very amazing Greta Thunberg says, look at the science, find out what's happening. Many leaders say to me when I travel the world, but we can't understand the future. You know, we don't know the future. But that's not entirely true. We know the pattern that we're currently creating. We also, as Bill Gates once said, that the future isn't out there, it's already happening somewhere in the world. There are already islands going underwater. The climate crisis is not something for our children and grandchildren alone, it's also happening now. Where is our future already happening? As Rashmi, you said beautifully, when it was just happening in Wuhan, we thought, oh, well, that's the other side of the world. We don't have to worry. We weren't listening. And Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst and doctor, said, what we refuse to hear when it whispers through our letterbox eventually will come and hit us over the head as fate. So how do we listen to the whispers? How do we get informed of the signs and attend to them? Bill Gates was warning for 15 years that we were going to have a global pandemic and it will be of a new kind. But were people listening? So when we become eco-informed, that means we're looking at not just what's happening locally, because as human beings, we're wired to respond to what's proximal in time and space, what's happening in our physical immediacy, the people we know, the places we know, the time we know, and not to see the bigger picture in time and space. But then, as happened beautifully on this webinar earlier that you were all involved in, we have to go to eco-aware, because so quickly, faced with that so much data in those 4 minutes from that video, we become overwhelmed and we want to shut off again. Or we become full of grief and despair. And we have to work through that grief and despair, grieving for the thousands upon thousands of species that have actually died in my lifetime. We have to grieve for those losses. We have to grieve for the fact of as Rashmi talked about her children, you know, as a grandfather, you know, I'm now less worried about my children, more worried about my grandchildren. And grieving for what won't be there in terms of ecological diversity in their lifetime. We have to deal with how quickly then that turns into anger and blame, and how we want to blame them the politicians, the people running the oil firms. We want to go and we want to protest. But the danger is if we run into the heroic or we run into the powerless, we're avoiding where we have to stand, which is as partners with our world. And it's only when we do enough of that emotional work, we never finish it. This isn't a one-way street. We keep going around the cycle. As Alison, Rashmi, Jaya will all say, you know, we think we've dealt with our grief or with our anger, and then suddenly, within 3 minutes of watching the news, I'm shouting at the television about, can't you see what that will do? Why aren't you waking up, right? And then I have to remember I'm also talking to myself. And I have to very quickly realize that blame has to move into request. Blame has to lead into partnering with people and into taking engagement and action. And it's only when we've done enough of those 3 stages that we can really start to go into how do we introduce this into our leadership and our coaching and become eco-engaged. And I've been running for Coacharia a little series on systemic coaching where we've been saying we have to completely transform coaching. We have to go into a coaching and transform leadership. I've done a whole research for Henley on tomorrow's leadership and the necessary revolution in today's leadership development. We have to realize coaching is not done by the coach. It's not done by the coach and the coachee working together. Leadership is not done by the leader or even by the leader and followers together. Leadership and coaching all require a triangle. The coach, the coachee, and the agenda that life is setting. And that's where, Shiva, your comment, we have to all be standing at our learning edge with life, the nature, the ecology, all our stakeholders being our teachers and our enemies. It is the most difficult person we have to lead. It's the most difficult client who is our best teacher. How do we treat every challenge that comes from COVID-19 to climate crisis to that, the impossible boss, not as a problem, but as our teacher? And what we've discovered is really the one-to-one meeting, whether you do it as a leader or as a coach, needs to be a crowded room, not a cozy place for 2 people to gather. We need to, in our first meeting with someone we lead or someone we coach, we need to invite the stakeholders into the room. We need to have empty chairs. So one of the regular things I do with every board or senior executive team I meet with is I bring in empty chairs. One says our employees, one says our customers and our partners, one says our investors, and one says the environment. And now I bring in one saying our collective grandchildren. How do we have those voices in every meeting we take part in? That's what it truly means to be eco-engaged. And what we've discovered supervising coaches and coaching leaders around the world, that if you don't do that in your first meeting, it becomes harder and harder. So if you're a coach, the next time you have a new client, in your very first meeting, say, who is your work in service of? Who does your work serve? If you're coaching a leader, who does your leadership serve? And then when they mention, oh, well, you know, my employees or my customers or my investors or my boss, you say, and who else? And you keep expanding that circle of engagement, that circle of community. What about the communities where your organization operates, that provide all your infrastructure? What about the ecology that provides 99+% of what makes life possible? How are they one of your stakeholders? And how do we need to get those voices all into our work together as leader and follower, or coach and coachee? How do we not be on the coachee's agenda or the coach's agenda or the leader's agenda or the follower's agenda but life's agenda. That's what eco-engagement's about. And we must change how we start our first ever meetings. So the contract is not between you and the follower. What do they want? What do you want? That's just transactional human egocentricity for two. How do we really say what is the work that the world out there requires us to do together that only we can do? And how do we spend our meetings in coaching and leadership, both being at our learning edge, where they don't have the answer as follower. We don't have the answer as leader. They don't have the answer as coachee or as coach. Neither of us has the answer, but we both know in our heads and our hearts that life is requiring us to find one. That is the important work of leadership and followership. That is the important work of coaching. But even there, we haven't done the full journey. To be eco-active is to go beyond your direct work. And just to share my own story around this, I've been concerned about the ecology since reading Rachel Carson and Gregory Bateson, meeting him in the 1960s. And I've had many other great teachers like Joanna Macy. But it's only really recently that I realized I was not taking responsibility for the things I should take responsibility for. Right? What was I doing to change ICF, EMCC, AC, all the coaching professions, to change their professional standards and competencies, their training requirements, their ethics statements? Yeah, I get asked to speak at all of those. What was I doing going and speaking at big coaching and leadership conferences around the world and flying in and inviting lots of other people to fly in and not asking, how are we going to create more value than the cost of being here? What was the ecological commitment of the conference? What was it doing to reduce the ecological entropic cost of having that conference? And where were, I went to a very large global coaching conference. People had flown in from 90 countries. And there was not one session on the ecology and coaching. At that point, this was a year to 2 years ago, at that point, I said, I can never collude with this again. But then I realized, actually, I have to go much further. I woke up to the fact that I have more power in my pension scheme than I do in my vote. What responsibility was I taking to ensure that money in my pension scheme and other people's pension schemes was being invested with ecological awareness? Then I realized I have to go further. I realized I run trainings in many parts of the world. I was due to come to run one in Mumbai this year. And now when I run a training anywhere, I insist on seeing the ecological policy of the place that's hosting the training. How are they sourcing their food? How are they managing their ecological cost of their air conditioning, their heating? These are questions I should be asking before I agree to use that venue. How am I managing, because I've been consulted with people like Unilever about how they were managing their complete value chain from their supplier to their customer's customer. How do we take responsibility for our impact upstream and downstream? And then we have to go back to being eco-curious. Because by taking that eco-active approach, we discover lots of things. You know, I learned working with Unilever, they tried to completely make their whole value chain for tea production, being one of the biggest tea retailers in the world, a link with India. And they discovered there was not enough fair traded organic tea farms in the world. So they had to work actively with their suppliers to make them. We did all sorts of work of how they reduced the ecological costs of all the shipping, the packaging, and all the rest of it. Do you know where they then discovered the big ecological cost was? In the West. less so in India. Very simply, it was that the people making the tea overfill their kettles. If we each overfill our kettle by 1 cup, and you multiply that by 7 or 8 times of using the kettle a day, and you multiply that by several billion people, the cost to the ecology is enormous. So what was their responsibility in changing the partners who make the kettles? Changing the people who buy their products. We have so much more influence than we realize. We just have to really open up our sphere of influence way, way beyond what we think it is. Many people have been taught you've got to be clear what you can change and what you can't change. Have the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's yesterday's learning. Today, I say there's only 3 splits. What we can change by ourselves, which is very little. What we can change with others through partnership, which is in much, much more than we realize. And the third factor is what we can influence others to change. Everything in the world falls into one of those 3 categories. We can either do it by ourselves, and there's a lot we can do, but it's limited. What we can do with others, as Mary Angelou said, whatever the question, community is the answer. Or as Margaret Mead said, the only thing that really changes the world is a small group of people really working together to make things happen. But not just humans working together in partnership with their stakeholder world and the world, the more than human world that needs to become our teacher. And I just need to say one other thing. And that is, when people go on this journey, what I've discovered is that we often think of, we've got to attend to the environment as a problem we address in coaching or in leadership, right? Something we have to fix, which is a very human, heroic attitude. And what I love from what Shiva said earlier is ecology and the more than human world is there to do the coaching, to do the leadership. We're there just to assist it doing the coaching and doing the leadership. Hazrat Inayat Khan, the great Indian teacher and musician who came to the West around 1907 and brought enormous wisdom by his music. He said, we all share one holy book. We may have different belief systems, but we share one holy book. It is spread out all around us. It is the book of nature. That is our teacher. That sets the agenda for our leadership. That sets the agenda for our organizations. That sets the agenda for our coaching. That's a cycle which is very exciting because we never stop learning.
Yes.
And we never stop needing coaching and needing supervision as leaders. There is more to learn.
Thank you ever so much, Peter, for taking people around that cycle with such depth and sort of material for us all to take into our work. Before we move from that, I just wondered whether we might do a little poll and ask you just to imagine where you are on that cycle. It's a very difficult question to answer because, as Eve Turner and Josie McLean and myself found on the at the global coaching conversation we had, is that people are in many places all at once. So where do you think you are on that cycle at this current moment in time? You should be able to see the poll now. Great.
Yes, where are you most engaged? Where are you most is at your learning engagement?
Yeah. Perhaps your edge, Peter, as you so beautifully
Your
described.
edge. Where's your current edge?
So there's about 70 people on the call so far. Eco-aware, eco-engaged, which is fantastic. I think where that eco-engage is really starting to test out and work out how to bring it into practice is, yeah, that's.
Can you share the results as they come in?
I don't know if I can share them as they come in, but I can certainly share them. I don't know whether I can.
Only once you end the poll will you be able to share. So we have a few people who want to vote. So please vote, everyone, and we can end the poll.
Yeah. We've got 23% eco-curious, 13% eco-informed, 27% eco-aware, 25% eco-engaged, and 11% eco-active. Okay. It's not moving much at the moment, so I think we might end that poll so you can see. Lovely. Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Very good.
Lovely. I think one of the things that we, because the co-founders of the Climate Coaching Alliance were Eve Turner and Josie McLean and myself, and one of the things that we're really keen to see is what's changed. So we ran our 24-hour global conversation in March. And Peter, I'm looking to you as a potential host here. So I need to pin your diary down. Is, we may run that again. In fact, we'd really like to run that again, perhaps in September, perhaps before, to see what's shifted as people's awareness has really taken a step forward through the learning that's been presented with COVID-19, but also the learning that's been presented with the shift that we're starting to see in our daily experience, in our daily environment, in our daily work. So, Jaya, I'm going to move to you now, because this is a cycle, I think, that's really impacted on you.
Thank you, Alison. So before I move to the solutioning piece, one of the poem of Rumi really touched me when I was actually preparing for this webinar. And the name of the poem is Deliverance. And it just seemed like that the earth is speaking to me saying, hey, your anguish is seeking a way to attain me. Yesterday evening, I heard your deep sighs. And I'm able, without any delay, to give you access, to show you a way of passage, to deliver you from this whirlpool of time, that you might set your foot upon the treasure of union with me. But the sweetness and the delight of the resting place are in proportion to the pain of the journey. Only then will you enjoy your native town and your king's fog, when you have suffered the anguish of exile. And it just felt like as if there is a message. There is a message that we all are going through already. And this poem is not written today. This is written in 60s. And it just is delivering the message as to how much the need of coexistence and consideration is required from us as human. And as you see the levels of ecological organization, the core is made up of organisms, and we are one of them. And what makes us think that we do not have influence on this agenda? And what makes us think that, what can I do? And on top of it, what made us make us think that, what can I do as a coach? Because I think coaches are supposed to be ahead of the journey. It's supposed to be proactive and supposed to be looking at things that the world is not even right now able to visualize. So rather than giving you solutions to what you can do, I have propositions for you. And my proposition is, can you start looking at your relationship with the material that you use? Stationery, printing, internet, technology, the recordings that we do, we occupy space on the server, the water we use, the tea and coffee we drink every day. It may look very funny at this stage, but then when you start analyzing your relationship with the products that you use every day, there is ecology in everything. Ecology sits with you every time. We eat ecology and we take out ecology, and we are consuming ecology in different shapes and forms. So can we look at that? And these are the questions which can also be asked to your clients at some point in time when you feel ready, right? How can can we think about how can we operate at zero waste mindset? Can your own practices as a coach be green, completely green? Can you have practices which completely have no, there is no wastage? What are the strengths we can contribute to a nourished ecology? How can we do it daily? How do I enable others to bring their strengths to this space? And while we all are emotionally intelligent and we preach that, how can we become ecologically intelligent? And the equation that I've written there is how can we become EI square? Emotionally intelligent and then ecologically intelligent. So I invite all of you to start thinking about these things and say, hey, what's my relationship to ecology? Because when we ask this question, saying, hey, what can I do as a coach? How can I bring this to coaching conversation? We are missing something. We are looking at something very, very minute. We're not looking at the bigger picture. But once you start establishing the relationship, understanding the relationship of ecology in your every moment of your life or your work, then you will see the questions popping up already. So how do we invite the nature to nurture us? And a very important question, how can I be earth every day? Because I'm part of that. But do I understand that? Do I understand that I'm earth every day? And that's where I'll end.
Thank you, Jaya. Peter's, in his ever wise, interconnected lens, interbeing lens of the world, has said actually nature nurtures us every day. How can we nurture? How can we notice that? So yes, beautiful. I wonder if there's an example of something you've tried and the impact of trying that in your personal life and practice that you might want to share.
Yeah, so my effort from last 5 years has been to keep my practice completely green. So there is no, so my work is virtual. The recordings that I will do will be very mindful that either we don't record, or if we record, then we, record only if it is necessary and delete it on time. My office space has plants, which kind of reminds me of, how we need to coexist. And there is a constant thinking about waste segregation, constant thinking about educating the children around, and constant effort to see, hey, how can I nurture the nature, because nature has done its job. So I've been constantly trying to look for practices and habit changes, actually, because it needs habit changes to buy less, because it takes packaging, right? And even if you need to buy, then you buy in a way that you are not consuming any extra resources. And how do you reuse and how do you recycle? And there has been, and I wasn't like this 5 years back, let me say that raises the hope. So we may not have started that journey like that, but can we become mindful? And can we be our own clients first? Can we be a coach like to ourselves first?
Beautiful. Catherine Holtz just shared the Zero Waste International Alliance website in the chat, which will be very helpful. Peter, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yes, I was also going just to build on what Jaya had said, to say, I'm noticing a couple of the comments. for much of my life, I would see nature as nurturing me in my weekends, where I would come from working with organizations and go into my garden and do my gardening and grow my vegetables, my flowers, go for walks in my, I planted several woodlands. But then I realized that I was caught in a deep split inside me, that I have to let nature nurture me. So when I have coached senior leaders at the top of the tall towers in Manhattan and in Canary Wharf in London, I always now, when I walk into one of their meeting rooms with them, I walk with them to the window. I take a deep in-breath and say, what do you notice? Because we mustn't just have nature in the countryside or nature in our weekends. We have to have nature in the real depth of our urban communities and in the midst of our work life. There shouldn't be anywhere. Somebody once said to me, it's not our job to bring nature into the coaching room. And I just simply said, you mean your clients don't eat? They don't breathe? Because if they do, it's already there. Every breath, nature is nurturing us. Every piece of light comes from the sun. Everything we eat is dependent upon the more than human world.
Thank you, Peter. That was a very brave person. I'm not sure they would say that to you these days. We had to bring Gregory Bateson into this this discussion, and as you've already, shared that you met him, I wonder if you want to talk to this quote. I mean, it says there is so much that could be said in relation to this quote, but what feels the most important thing to say at this point, if it hasn't been said already, Peter?
Well, just to build on it, because as you know, well, Alison, I didn't write a book with it. I've not written a book yet without quoting Gregory Bateson in one form or other. He was such a polymath, a great visionary thinker, anthropologist, psychologist, one of the founders of cybernetics and systems, general systems thinking. And he also said, and unless we can fundamentally change our way of thinking and realize that we've misunderstood Darwin, it's not the survival of the strongest or the winners, it's the survival of those who most can work in adaptability. The unit of survival is never the individual or the team or the organization or the country. That's not the unit of survival. The unit of survival is any one of those in dynamic relationship with their ecological niche. It's not that you adapt to the niche or you exploit the niche, unless you've got a synergistic cycle between any organization and its wider ecological niche, it will not survive. It's the ones who can learn in relationship to their environment. And he said, if we don't shift that way of thinking, lovely phrase, we don't have a snowball in hell's chance of surviving the next century. So ecology starts by shifting our way of thinking, which takes beautifully onto the slide.
It does, and what you've shared there just links so beautifully with Josie McLean's model here. There's this whole-on diagram, and one of the things that Josie done a whole PhD and works deeply in sustainability, and one of the things about a sustainable system is when the earth is going to be, it will be sustainable when each system negotiates its self-interest with the greater system it's part of. And so we are made up of many systems. If we think about a cell is a system within a system of an organ, within a system of our body, or within a system of a system, a digestive system, or a neurological system. And then that is itself a system within the system of our body. And each part, to be sustainable, has to negotiate its self-interest within the context of that wider system. And so when you take that out into the sort of you, the organization, society, nature, in order for us to be sustainable in the different systems we operate in, these different levels of system to be sustainable, the different sizes of system to be sustainable, there needs to be that negotiated self-interest within the context of that system. And that speaks so centrally to what you just mentioned there about Gregory Bateson's work and thinking.
And Alison, there's a lovely Nigel Cumberland has put in another lovely Gregory Bateson quote: "The creature that wins against its environment destroys itself." So, and we can see that in every level of the system, as you've just mentioned.
Yeah. On this slide, there are a number of questions here that just to reflect on, and maybe there are some answers that everybody would like to give in the chat box, but maybe there are some questions we would like to answer as panelists as well. So I'm just thinking that we haven't heard from Rashmi for a while. I've never known her so quiet. But I'm wondering if you would like to just maybe start off with something here on this slide.
When it's a freewheeling conversation, that's when I step in, Alison. Okay, so actually, while all of you were talking, I was recollecting something I noted when I see, ever since I've become part of this group, I always love to read and to take down points which I see in interviews and which kind of touches me. So yesterday's paper carried this wonderful interview with the legendary photographer, Joel Sartor. And he has, to his credit, documenting endangered species for the National Geographic Photo Arc. And the recent photograph was the 10,000th species that under human care, endangered species that he had photographed, a wild cat. And in the process of telling us all about his journey as a photographer and what he's learned, and the one question that stood out for me was about COVID-19 and what he takes away from it. And there he said something really powerful. He said, what happens when humans hurt wildlife is something that we have to give a thought to. Many wild animals have viruses that can be transmitted to humans if they come into contact. Early COVID-19 cases can be traced to the wet markets. He says that I would remind people that this planet is interconnected, and when we work and save animals, we are actually saving ourselves. So for me, that was so powerful. And the way the animals took over our roads and streets, they told us very clearly that listen, time out, think before you come back into action. And that was something which was my biggest learning all through this entire thing. So I love this first question that is put up in the slide, which is, what is the free education that COVID is giving us? Of course, a lot of free education. But then the fourth question I see is hugely connected. What might we forget at our own peril? Because everyone's waiting for the lockdown to be done with and get back to work. So the risks that we carry is something that I think this pause button has to be really seriously taken. So we are speaking here, lovely chats coming across in the conversation from people who are listening, and some very beautiful statements I read as it was going up there. I was in fact lost in that conversation. So somewhere these two questions connected was my bigger question, that in our hurry to get back into, we are calling it the new normal, but everyone's hoping it's going to back to the old normal. And are we going to forget some of these lessons? Because suddenly relationships have become very important. Zoom, people realized, can be used even for personal friendship calls. And this was available years ago, but people never used it for catching up with old friends. And every interview that I watch with the CXOs and CEOs and CHROs, all of them speak about nature being an integral part of whatever we are going to do. So that is where I feel, are we going to sustain this? And I hope we do, because that's what is going to give meaning to our lives. So I think I'll leave it back to you, because when we say how do we grow the human capacity to live in with our climate as our teacher, well, it is a question that we need to ponder with. So, Alison, I hope you didn't regret asking me to unmute.
No, I would never do that. I mean, we too have found it's interesting, Jaya, that you've taken your business online. One of the things that I was asked to do this year was to give a talk at a conference in Cork in Ireland, and that would have been happening today, actually, on regenerative coaching. But I'd signed a pledge not to fly. So my biggest headache for the first 2 months of the year was to work out how I was going to get across the Irish Sea without flying, with a really minimal carbon impact. And COVID-19 took that headache away and took the whole thing away. But it did just make me realize, why? Why do we need to fly everywhere? And Jaya's already there with an online business. And actually, my business is so much easier online when I'm not rushing around. So I'm really sure that there's a transformation to my business that's going to happen as a result of this. But not only that, the bringing that much wider angled lens of the systems within systems to every one of my client conversations.
And Alison, I think as coaches, most of people ask me as to, is it impactful? And I said, impact is what you bring, not the technology, or not, yes, there is a magic in, meeting somebody face to face. There is an energy there, but nonetheless, there is so much you can do online, which you just need to try. And I think as coaches, we need to keep coming out of the myths, the mind blocks that we keep creating for ourselves. Like you're right now engaging with all your families and friends and doing most important conversation on Zoom, coaching can also be easily done online. It's just about looking at it, changing your tools, creating all your documents online, becoming more creative. Yeah, bringing more tools to your coaching, and pretty much everything can be done.
Yeah. In fact, I think Coach Ari are running a panel, running an event on becoming an online business on the 29th of May. They've just popped that in the chat box. Shiva mentioned an answer in relation to question 3, what is it that we can only learn? And that is that there is no blame, that we're all in this together. This is us. And, we are in everything and everything in us. So that is a real learning. And there's a learning from Joanna Macy's work, which Peter's mentioned already. And the work of this idea of the great turning, it's not going to happen in our lifetime. And for some of us, it's definitely not going to happen because we've been already on this planet for a number of decades. But it's actually back to the point you just made, Jaya. We might not see the impact we want to see in the world, but it's knowing that we're doing the things that will create the possibility of that impact in the future time. And that sort of different concept of time is something that's been hammered out of us in this generation and generations before, and in our business world. How do we really see time through a much more extended lens?
There is a question here. I think, Peter, you would be the right person to answer this, which says that seems like cloud is going to be the biggest producer of CO2. And another one is, how healthy is it going to be to have continuous screen time by going online?
Yes, I noticed those 2 questions come in, and I was just pondering.
Yes.
And the phrase that came into my head, my wife has a very sage bit of advice, which is beware solutions. Because sometimes, as human beings, we want to rush to a solution. We can't bear to sit with the problem, so we try and come up with a solution. But often, as Peter Senge once said, the way out of one problem is the way back in, we discover. And I don't know enough and I'm very curious, and I would, if anyone's got any references on, we need to discover a lot more about the ecological cost. You know, you mentioned earlier, Jaya, about recording. You know, how do we minimize our internet costs? Because we can see, yes, we're stopping traveling, but internet conferencing also is very energy costly.
Yes.
And I think we need to be really curious about that, so we can become informed about that, and then go around the site, and then feel guilty about how much we're doing it. But your other one about screen time, I discovered within working with China with the early days of COVID that I very soon was suffering from Zoomitis, and which was not healthy for my body or my eyesight or my energy use. So I had to make sure that in the middle of every day I had 2 hours working in the garden to become an upright being again, and resting my eyes on the horizon, not on the screen. There is something about, there is more and more research on screen time. Professor Susan Greenfield's done a lot on screen time and the effect on the neurology, which is worth looking at, and others. So, you know, again, I think we rush to a new medium without then becoming curious about that.
So maybe we should put the question forth to those who are in here as to what are they going to do, what do they think is the right way to handle this balance between becoming a victim of Zoomitis and having a healthy life and your relationships. Maybe that question could be a question that we throw back at you to see how you're handling the entire challenge. Because there's so much free online, right from stopping Netflix early in the morning. That's what Pradeep, I think, who said that. Maybe that can change a lot in our life. But if you have suggestions on how we can handle this, it'll be really good. It's a good question to ask Sundar Pichai. There is not one simple solution, as Peter said. If there was, we would have definitely found it. So this is going to be maybe our next big mission together. Like we said, the community is the power. Maybe we can come up with something. And
so Rashmi, if I had one more thing, is that
sure.
that my next lesson after COVID started to spread around the world, I suddenly discovered I was busier than ever.
Yes.
Running support webinars, working with my clients, supporting them to go virtual, having invites from all over the world because people thought I was now very available. And the next thing, which I still haven't cracked, but I'm working on, is how do I do what is mine to do?
Mm-hmm.
How do I only do what is necessary? And because we can become addicted to being out there in the world, being on Zoom, being on House Party, being on net, you know, and it's an activity hunger. How do I only do what is necessary and what is mine to do?
Correct. Because that takes me back to a new problem that they found out here, which is called the lockdown fatigue. This is a new problem that psychiatrists are dealing with because recently I read an article on that when you suddenly feel the day has passed and you've not done something fruitful, but you sat in front of the system and you're tired, you're mentally exhausted, but there's nothing for you to see. So if we are in that world of being lost with the time we have on hand, actually working from home, which saves us commute time, and we're still very busy, like you said, Peter, than before. Maybe we are not handling our time very well, was one of the suggestions. Like, be very particular about the discipline of when I need to get off the system. And at that time, set an alarm or do something with your laptop such that it just shuts off and you're off. And make sure you go into nature. If you have a space for yourself as a little garden or a green space, just go there, or take a hard copy of a book, but literally step out, physically move out such that you are away. because this they found out is a new problem with people who are working from home. Lockdown fatigue or quarantine fatigue. So we are having other beautiful silver linings. In the silver linings, there are also certain questions that need answer.
Yeah.
So let me take that one step further, Rashmi.
Yeah.
If you really want to do an advanced class, from one of my spiritual teachers, is to do a practice called doing nothing.
Yes.
It's one of the hardest practices.
Yes.
So I would suggest you just start with an hour and then gradually work up to a day, and then if you can to 3 days, which is in that time, you give yourself a time limit. You only do what becomes obvious and necessary to be done. You do nothing out of your personal will or choice. If you really want to discover how nature nurtures you, just do a practice for 24 hours of doing only what becomes necessary and must be done. Nothing, so you can't read or plan or just be with what is. And it's a beautiful but very, very tough practice.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So when I was looking at the screen question, and we're talking about all kind of fatigues, and we're talking about everything that will be a fallout to what we are going through, I'm reminded of my visit to physiotherapist, and I was suffering with a lot of back pain, and I said, I kept going on telling the doctor, I think this is the wrong pillow I have got. And he said, you're focusing on the 20% of the problem. You're not looking at that your muscles are weak. And that's exactly the message that we all need to get, that we need to focus on building immunity in a lot of senses versus keep looking at the causes of the problem. Because you may not be able to control the causes in so many ways, but immunity is yours. Be it screen, be it body, be it corona, be it any kind of fatigue. And that's where the conversation about going into the nature, doing nothingness is our own discipline. So I just thought I'll bring that up. It was just flashing in front of me when we spoke about
No, that's true, because life is all about choices. Tomorrow we cannot step back and we started off right at the beginning, not the blame game, but what we choose that truly tells and defines what we make out of the opportunities life throws at us.
Yeah. We're coming quite close to the end of our time now, and it's quite a lot of resources being shared in the chat box. So if anyone doesn't know yet, then you can easily save the chat box messages by just clicking on the 3 little dots next to the type message here space. But Peter, you'll be pleased to hear that Chris Ballard is also a fan of the do nothing technique. He had to use that recovering from heart surgery, and as you said, it was fantastic. And there's some interesting work being done at INSEAD on Zoom nausea and remote relationships. So we are learning as we go forward. Somebody can't find the 3 dots on their Mac. Yeah. That's the limit of my technical capacity, I'm afraid. Is there anything else that you want to just say or share? Or
I was wondering whether there is still time for me to read this short poem.
That would be beautiful.
Please do.
It was a poem that I wrote just 2 weeks ago, after working with on a virtual conference on coaching supervision with Pam McLean, who is the founder of the Hudson Coaching School. Lovely woman. And she was telling me about Pushkin, who when he was about to get married in Moscow, went to see his family farm, which was quite a long way from Moscow. And as he got there, there was a pandemic of cholera. And he couldn't leave the farm to go and get married back in Moscow. And it took him ages, even to let his wife know he wouldn't be turning up. And for 3 months, he was stuck in Baldino in the autumn. And it was the most creative time of his life. And in Russia, they still use the phrase, the Baldino autumn. And as I was hearing that story, it made me think of the COVID spring. So I wrote this poem, which begins with 2 lines from the great Italian poet. Earlier we had Mevlana Rumi, the great Sufi poet. This is from Dante. It's called The COVID Spring. Do not be afraid. Our fate cannot be taken from us. It is a gift. It is often easier to give than receive. Can we truly accept with an open heart what fate lays at our feet? When your cat brings you young dead birds or a field mouse still half alive, or when life brings you a surprise virus, or fate takes you round a dark, unexpected corner. This COVID spring, like Pushkin's Baldino autumn, is a time of renewal, of going inside, the great pause, when planes no longer crisscross our skies, shops and bars are asleep, and there is quiet. In Delhi, the mountains have reappeared, and in Venice, the fish have returned. Once again, I can hear the lark ascending, breaking the clear air over our spring white hedgerows. When the rivers dry up, we must discover the hidden springs, often buried beneath our busyness or covered over with possessions. We must dig them out, renew their flow, and feel the water course through our veins and refresh the land as it in turn awakens us to new unseen connections.
Beautiful, beautiful, Peter. Really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, shall we draw this to a close?
Maybe Magda can come in now and take over, because it seems like we have just 2 minutes to close.
Oh, sure. I can come in. I thought you meant you guys can close with your closing comments. I have very little to say other than I already thought that I was pretty good with this eco stuff. I've turned vegetarian, mostly vegan, frankly. I'm good about turning off my lights. There's so much I'm doing, and even just as I'm listening to you guys, my wheels have been turning, and I'm thinking there's so much more that that I should be doing, which kind of frightens me because I thought I was doing a good job. So I feel a tiny bit sick, but in a good way. So thank you, all of you, for the inspiring session. I think we can do a lot more, and we will continue talking about this because things start with a conversation. But I agree with a few comments I saw in the chat that, you know, action is what we need. So let's take some action. I know that I will today. I'm going to review my life and see what else I can do.
Just a request, Magda, Alison, if you can put the slide, it has the website ID. So whoever's interested to be part of the Climate Coaching Alliance can visit the website and become a member, because Nigel is here and he's creating a seed bank of ideas. So anything that you can contribute to make life, nature, and the planet much more beautiful and our ecosystems part of her, I think you're most welcome. So Alison, if you want to say anything.
I think you said it all, really. The Climate Coaching Alliance is really, it's moving forward, but on living systems leadership principles. So we're trying not to be too willful and just following the energy, and bringing people in, giving away control and allowing the community to become self-organizing across the globe, and building in those feedback loops so that we all can learn from each other. And so this has just been a wonderful opportunity to touch into some of the wisdoms that we all share, both as participants, but also panelists. So it's just been such a wonderful conversation to be part of. And I'm a really strong believer that words are actions. And so whilst conversation can feel like it is an inactive thing to do, it's actually already starts to change what's possible in our minds. And so action is required. And I think there's been so much talk of shifting to minimalism, changing how we operate, and just being really, really mindful that I know that that action is going to be happening. And my colleague Zoe Cohen, who some of you may know, has a wonderful phrase of pushing. It's just about pushing the peanuts. And if we all push enough peanuts, then, you know, the world will change around us. So.
Yes, and there's a very beautiful Sanskrit quote, which is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole world is one family. And the moment we start making this our dictum of life, I think the I, me, myself will slowly vanish into us, and our planet. So Peter, your last words before leaving.
Just to say thank you to all those who have joined, and thank you for what you're already doing, and thank you for the more that you can be doing.
Yes.
All our grandchildren are relying on us, as is the more than human world.
So thank you very much.
You know what?
Everyone. Yes,
I'll just jump in with something, because, you know, I mentioned earlier in the chat that we will be doing a webinar on the 29th, which I'll send an invite out to everyone in the next couple of days, about starting your business online. Because, you know, this session has made me realize just how many things that I take for granted. And even in that session, the goal was, okay, people are starting, they're learning new things. Maybe being online is completely new to them. So the session was going to be about really kind of logistical, here's literally how you do things. But if there's anyone in the audience that has some, you know, tips around making online businesses more eco-friendly, I would request that you please get in touch with me and maybe join me on the panel. But I will, for my action point, I will change that webinar to something that's focused on not just starting an online business, but starting one that is as sustainable and eco-friendly as possible. Because like you said, words, they are actions. So
fabulous, fabulous. Okay, we're past the 6 o'clock hour. Oh,
yes, thank you so much, everyone. For anyone who needs to claim their CCEU for this session, I did add in the link in the chat right now. And for those of you watching on YouTube, just email me. You know how to reach me. But thank you so much, everyone. This was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.